My daughter-in-law held the signed share certificate in her trembling hands, her face glowing with the raw, naked triumph of a queen who has just captured the entire board. She thought she was holding an empire. She had no idea that, without me, she was holding nothing more than a beautifully printed piece of worthless paper. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Eleanor. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 81 years old, and I'm speaking to you from my home in a small historic mill town in the beautiful Green Mountains of Vermont. The story I'm about to tell you, my goodness, it's not an easy one. It's a story about my life's work, a business my late husband and I built from the dirt up. But more than that, it's a story about family and about a betrayal so quiet, so insidious, it almost succeeded in convincing me that my life's work, and indeed my own life, no longer had any value. It's a secret I have held in my heart for over 2 years, a long, painful chess game that no one, not even my own son, knew I was playing. He knows his wife, my brilliant, ambitious daughter-in-law, left him. He knows there was a terrible, explosive business disagreement. He thinks she simply made a catastrophic financial miscalculation. He has no idea that the miscalculation was me. He has no idea that I, his quiet, aging mother, laid a trap so perfect that she willingly, eagerly signed her own corporate death warrant. It is a terrible thing, you know, to wage a secret war against the woman your son loves. There is a shame in it that feels like swallowing dust. You begin to believe the story they tell about you. That you are old. That you are out of touch. That your sentimentality is a liability. That your mind is fading. You start to see yourself through their eyes as a relic, a charming but ultimately irrelevant founder, a ghost haunting the hallways of her own creation. It's the most subtle and suffocating kind of poison. But I am telling this story now because I have finally purged that poison from my soul. I am telling it because the truth of what she tried to do, and the truth of how I fought back, deserves to see the light of day. And I am telling it for anyone out there who has ever built something with their heart in their hands, only to be told that it is no longer theirs to control. Before I begin this journey, I would be so very grateful for your kindness and your support. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your presence here, your willingness to listen, it is a great comfort. It gives an old woman like me the courage to finally unlock the boardroom door of my memory and reveal the true and unvarnished accounting of this painful chapter of my life. Thank you, my dears. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It all began not with a business plan, but with a garden and with a love story. My late husband, my Arthur, was a botanist, a professor at the local university. He was the quietest, most patient man I have ever known. He didn't have a head for business, but he had a soul for the earth. His passion was for strange, forgotten, and often difficult plants. He would spend years coaxing a single, rare orchid to bloom, or cross-pollinating herbs to create a new scent. Our garden wasn't a neat and tidy suburban affair. It was a chaotic, magical, and deeply personal laboratory. I was a weaver. My passion was the loom, the feel of the thread in my hands, the creation of color and texture. For years, my art was my hobby. But I was frustrated. I was frustrated by the chemical, artificial colors of the yarns I could buy. They felt dead, lifeless. They didn't have the depth, the soul, of the colors I saw in my husband's garden. One summer afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch, lamenting the flat, lifeless blue of a skein of yarn I had bought. Arthur came and sat beside me. He had been working with a strange, flowering vine he had imported from Japan, a plant called tsukikusa. He had a smudge of deep, brilliant blue on his thumb from one of its crushed petals. He looked at the yarn in my hands, then at his thumb, and a slow, wonderful smile spread across his face. "I have an idea, my love," he said. That was the day our business, Eleanor's Loom, was born. It started as a partnership, a beautiful marriage of his science and my art. He was the alchemist. He would spend his weekends in his greenhouse, using his deep knowledge of botany to extract the most incredible, vibrant, and permanent dyes from the plants he so lovingly cultivated. He discovered that the root of a certain type of matter, when harvested after the first frost, produced a red so deep and true it would make you weep. He learned that the pollen of a rare mountain poppy could be fermented to create a gold so luminous it seemed to shine from within. His creations were not just dyes, they were secrets coaxed from the earth. And I would take these secret colors, and I would weave them into fabrics that were unlike anything else in the world. The business grew slowly, organically, by word of mouth. At first, it was just me, at my loom in the spare bedroom. Then we hired a few of the local women, ladies who had worked in the old mills and still knew the art of a good tight weave. We bought an old, abandoned dairy barn on the edge of town and filled it with beautiful, old, second-hand wooden looms. Arthur and I didn't just build a business, we built a family. The sound of those looms was the heartbeat of our new life. Our brand was built on a simple, unshakable foundation: quality, authenticity, and a secret proprietary art that no one else could replicate. Because the heart of the company, the true source of its value, was not the looms or the barn. It was the dyes. And the dyes were a secret known only to Arthur, and then to me. He was a wise man, my Arthur. As the business grew, as designers and artists from New York and Paris began to seek out our unique fabrics, he became protective. Not of the money, but of the art, of the knowledge. Eleanor, he said to me one evening, as we sat in his study, surrounded by his old, leather-bound botany books. What we have created, it is special. It is you. It is me. It is this garden. It cannot be replicated in a factory in some faraway country. Its value is in its very nature, its rarity. And so, he made a decision. With the help of a very clever patent lawyer, he didn't patent the dyes themselves. He patented the YE process, the unique, multi-step, temperature-controlled process of extracting and fixing those colors. And he did not file the patents under the name of the company, Eleanor's Loom, Inc. He filed them under my name, Eleanor Vance. Personally, the company, he explained, would operate under a licensing agreement. It would pay me, its founder, a nominal fee each year for the exclusive right to use my patented processes. This, he said, tapping the thick legal document, is the soul of the company. And the soul, my love, must always belong to you. A company can be bought and sold. It can be gutted and restructured. But your knowledge, your art, that is yours. This way, no matter what happens, you will always be the heart of Eleanor's Loom. Without you, and without your permission, the company is nothing more than a collection of old wooden machines in a barn. It has the name, but it does not have the fire. Nindaris, Ekopananirantetiwais, Gudapurkakti. I remember laughing at the time. It seemed like such a strange, overly complicated precaution. We were a family business. Our son, Robert, was just a boy. The idea of a hostile takeover was something that happened in movies, not in our quiet little Vermont town. Oh, what a wise, wise man my husband was. What a fool I was to have forgotten the terrible, brilliant truth of the fortress he had built around me. We had one child, our son, Robert. Oh, he was the gentlest soul. He was a beautiful boy, with my love of color and texture, and his father's kind, quiet heart. But he did not have his father's passion for the earth, for the slow, patient science of botany. And he did not have my fire for the loom. He was a dreamer, a poet. He loved the beauty of what we created, but he had no interest in the hard, often messy, work that went into it. While Arthur and I would spend our weekends in the garden or at the mill, Robert would be in his room, reading or sketching in a notebook. He was a wonderful, creative boy, but he was soft. He was not a fighter. He was a person who longed for a life of quiet, aesthetic beauty, a life removed from the grit and the struggle of building something from the ground up. He loved us, and he was proud of what we had built, but from a distance. It was our work, not his. We, of course, were so proud of him. We sent him to the best liberal arts college in New England. He studied art history, then poetry. He wanted to be a writer. We supported him completely. We believed that the greatest gift we could give our son was the freedom to pursue his own dream, a freedom that our hard work had made possible. We didn't realize that, in doing so, we were also making him unprepared for a world that was not as gentle or as forgiving as the one we had created for him. And then, 8 years ago, Robert brought Caroline home. She was an MBA student from a top university, a woman who radiated a kind of fierce modern intelligence that was both impressive and, if I am being honest, a little terrifying. She was like a beautiful, sleek, and very sharp knife. She was, I must admit, brilliant with me. She was not like the other girlfriends Robert had brought home, young women who were often intimidated by our family's quiet success. Caroline was not intimidated. She was fascinated. She was a student of success, and she treated me like a research project. She would sit with me for hours in my weaving studio, her eyes scanning the looms, the skeins of colored yarn, the shelves of dye samples. She didn't ask about the art. She asked about the business. "This is extraordinary, Eleanor," she'd say, her voice a low, admiring murmur. "To have built a brand with this kind of cult following, with such high profit margins, based on a completely proprietary, artisanal process. It's a case study. It's brilliant." She spoke a language I didn't quite understand, a language of vertical integration and brand identity and market penetration. She was so sharp, so interested, and she was so very, very good to Robert. She treated him like a rare and precious poet, a genius who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of the world. She managed his life. She organized his schedule. She even helped him get a small book of his poetry published. She made him feel seen and cherished and important. And my son, my gentle, dreaming son, fell completely and utterly in love with her. He saw her strength as his shelter. He had no idea it would one day become his cage. The first time I felt that cold little shiver of unease, the first time I saw the predator behind her perfect, smiling mask, was about a year after they were married. They had come for dinner, and I was showing Caroline the old botany books in Arthur's study. They were his most precious possession, filled with his handwritten notes in the margins. I opened one to a page with a beautiful, detailed drawing of a rare Andean orchid. "This one was his pride and joy," I said softly. "It took him 10 years to get it to bloom. And the color he managed to extract from its petals, a shade of purple so deep it was almost black. It's our most popular dye." Caroline looked at the drawing, but her eyes were not filled with wonder. They were narrowed, calculating. 10 years, she said, her voice a little too sharp. "For one color?" She shook her head. "The inefficiency is staggering. Have you ever considered reverse engineering the chemical compound? You could have it synthesized in a lab for a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time. You could scale production overnight. I just stared at her. She was talking about my husband's life's work, the slow, patient, magical art of coaxing color from the earth, and she was suggesting we turn it into a chemical formula to be cooked up in a lab. She didn't see the art. She didn't see the magic. She saw an inefficiency to be solved. She saw a product to be scaled. "My dear," I said, and my voice was colder than I intended. "That is not how we do things at Eleanor's Loom." She just smiled, that bright, unreadable smile. "Of course," she said. "How? Traditional. Traditional.d." She said it like it was a disease. After Arthur passed away 4 years ago, Caroline's helpful interest in the business went into overdrive. She and Robert moved back to our small town, and with her impressive MBA, she convinced the board and me to create a new position for her. Chief Operating Officer. Dar. She was going to modernize us, to streamline our processes. "Eleanor, you have built a beautiful artisanal brand," she'd said in a special presentation to the board. "But it is a sleeping giant. It is stuck in the past. I have a vision to turn Eleanor's Loom from a niche, boutique company into a global luxury brand. But to do that, we need to be more aggressive. We need to be smarter. Mm, as in tone. She was so confident, so convincing. She had charts and graphs and projections. And I, lost in my grief, tired and old, I led her. I thought, perhaps she is right. Perhaps it is time for a new generation. I let her take the reins. David, my son, was given a title as well. Head of Creative Development. It was a meaningless role, designed to make him feel important while keeping him far away from the real levers of power. He was happy. He was married to a brilliant, powerful woman who was going to take his family's little company and turn it into an empire. He was the poet, and she was the queen. I didn't realize, until it was far too late, that in every empire, the old queen must eventually be disposed of. And Caroline was not a woman who believed in a long and peaceful retirement. She was a woman who believed in a swift, clean, and total coup. Caroline's modernization of Eleanor's Loom was less of a renovation and more of a hostile invasion. It was a slow, brutal, and systematic erasure of everything my Arthur and I had built. She moved with the speed and efficiency of a corporate raider, but with the intimate, smiling cruelty that can only be wielded by a family member. She began by changing the very soul of the company. The long communal work tables in the main workshop were dismantled and replaced with a series of cold, sterile, individual cubicles. The women who had worked side by side for 30 years, sharing stories and laughter, were now isolated, their quiet chatter replaced by the clicking of keyboards as they were forced to fill out daily productivity reports. The dyes, my beautiful secret colors from Arthur's garden, were now referred to as colorant formulas and assigned alphanumeric codes. The madder root red that had taken my husband years to perfect became Formula 73B. The art, the magic, the soul of our work was being systematically stripped away and replaced with the cold, dead language of the spreadsheet. At first I fought back. I was still the founder, after all. I still held a seat on the board. In our weekly meetings, I would raise my voice in protest. Caroline, we cannot replace the hand-loomed selvage with a machine finish, I would argue, my voice trembling with a passion that felt out of place in that cold room. Our clients, the designers we have worked with for decades, they pay a premium for that detail. It is our signature. It is a mark of true quality. Now, Caroline would listen to me with a look of perfect, patient, and deeply patronizing sympathy. She would let me finish, and then she would turn to the rest of the board. I hear Eleanor's concerns, she would say, her voice as smooth and cool as glass. And I honor her commitment to the traditional methods. But the data is clear. A machine finish will increase our production speed by 12% and reduce our costs by 7%. In today's market, we simply cannot afford the luxury of sentimentality. She was a master of it. She would frame my wisdom as sentimentality. She would frame my 50 years of experience as being traditional. She would hold up a chart with impressive-looking numbers, and she would make my defense of our company's soul sound like the ramblings of a dotty old woman who was standing in the way of progress. The board, cowed by her confidence and mesmerized by her profit projections, always sided with her. She was slowly, methodically turning me into a caricature in my own company. The quaint, out-of-touch founder who just didn't understand the modern world. And she was doing the same thing at home. The gaslighting was a constant, gentle, and maddening presence. She would move my keys from the hook by the door to the mantelpiece, and then watch, with that same look of pitying concern, as I searched for them. "Oh, Eleanor," she'd say with a soft sigh, finding them for me. "Your memory is just not what it used to be, is it? We really need to be more careful." She was building her case, piece by piece, for my daughter. She would recount these manufactured incidents to Robert, her voice full of a daughter-in-law's loving worry. "I'm so concerned about your mother, darling," I overheard her say to him one evening. She was confused again today. She misplaced her keys. She argued for an hour in the board meeting about a production detail we had all agreed upon last month. I'm afraid the stress of the business is becoming too much for her. I know. Well, just And Robert, my dear, gentle Robert, who loved his brilliant wife and his aging mother, was caught in the middle. He didn't know what to believe. He would look at me with his sad, worried eyes, and I could see the conflict tearing him apart. "Mom," he'd say to me in a quiet moment, "are you sure you're feeling all right? Caroline is she's worried about you." He wanted to believe me, but he was a man who had always been intimidated by strong women. And Caroline was the strongest woman he had ever known. Her reality, backed by its charts and its data, and its relentless, unshakable confidence, was simply more powerful than mine. The true goal of her campaign, of course, was my shares. As the founder, I still held the majority of the company's stock. I was the one person with the power to truly stop her. And she knew that the fortress my husband had built, the patent agreement that gave me ultimate control over the dyes, was a wall she could not break through. So, she decided to go after the fortress keeper. The final, brutal act of her takeover began a year ago. It centered around a massive potential deal, the largest in the company's history. A luxury hotel chain wanted to commission an exclusive line of fabrics for their new line of boutique hotels around the world. It was a deal that would, as Caroline put it, catapult the brand into the stratosphere. But their terms were difficult. They wanted our look, our colors, our name. But they wanted it at a price point that was impossible to achieve without gutting our quality. They wanted us to use cheaper, synthetic threads. And most horrifyingly, they wanted us to begin outsourcing the production of the dyes themselves to a chemical company in Asia, using a synthesized version of our formulas. It was a deal with the devil. It would make the company millions in the short term, but it would destroy its soul. It would be the end of everything Arthur and I had built. I refused. Absolutely and unequivocally. In a tense, closed-door board meeting, I made my case. I spoke of legacy, of quality, of the promise we had made to our customers and our employees. And Caroline let me speak. She let me pour my heart out. And when I was done, she turned to the board and she played her trump card. She did not argue with my points. She argued with my sanity. "I think," she began, her voice full of a deep, sorrowful regret, "we are all seeing what I have been so worried about for so long. This is not a business decision for Eleanor. It is a purely emotional one. She is unable to separate her personal sentimentality from the financial reality of our situation. The stress of this decision, I'm afraid it has made her unable to act in the best interests." She then presented them with a thick folder. It was a collection of evidence she had been gathering for months. Memos detailing my confusion in meetings. A signed affidavit from a disgruntled employee she had bribed, claiming I was forgetful and erratic. Even a letter from our family doctor expressing concern over my cognitive health, a concern she had planted in his head during a private conversation. It was a masterfully constructed case for my own incompetence. And then she turned to me, her eyes full of a chilling, predatory sympathy. "Agnes," she said, using my first name to strip me of my title as founder, "we all love you, but the board has a fiduciary duty to protect the shareholders, and I'm afraid you have become a liability. We believe it is time for you to retire, truly retire, for your own good and for the good of the company." Not only. She proposed a vote to have me removed from the board and declared a founder emeritus, a quaint, powerless title. A vote to give her, as coup, the final authority to sign the hotel deal. I looked around the room. I looked at the faces of the men my husband had called his friends, and I saw in their eyes that I had lost. They were looking at me with pity. They believed her. And then she delivered the final, killing blow. It was the solution she had been planning all along. "To make this transition smooth," she said, her voice a gentle purr, "and to ensure Eleanor's financial security, I have drawn up a simple share transfer agreement. It will transfer her voting shares to a new family trust, a trust that will be managed, of course, by myself and Robert. The financial benefits will remain entirely hers. This is simply about decision-making. It is about protecting her. It is a protecting her. It is a..." She slid the document across the polished table towards me. It was my death warrant. She was asking me to sign away my life's work, my husband's legacy, based on a mountain of lies she had so brilliantly constructed. I looked at her. I looked at the board members, their faces full of a sad, pitying resolve. I looked at my son, who sat beside her, his face pale, his eyes on the table, a portrait of weak, miserable, and utter defeat. He was not going to save me. I felt a despair so profound, so absolute, it felt like the world was ending. She had won. She had beaten me. She had taken my company, my legacy, my own son. And she had done it all with a smile, with a hand that trembled with a rage and a grief that was so deep I thought it would consume me. I took the pen she offered, and I signed my name. As she took the papers from me, a small, triumphant smile touched her lips. "You've done the right thing, Eleanor," she whispered. "Arthur would be proud." But as I sat there, in the ruins of my life, a memory surfaced. A memory of my Arthur, a brilliant botanist, but also a surprisingly shrewd man. A memory of a complex legal document, a patent agreement, and a secret, hidden clause he had called his ace in the hole. He thought he had taken my company. He had no idea he had just acquired a beautiful, historic, and completely worthless collection of old looms. The game was not over. He had just moved his queen into the most vulnerable position on the board. The week following my surrender was one of the longest of my life. I had to play the part of the defeated matriarch, to watch as Caroline, now armed with what she believed was absolute control, began to enact her vision. He moved forward with the new, cheaper supplier. He signed the contract that would gut our quality. He spoke of restructuring and downsizing, words that I knew were just sterile, corporate euphemisms for firing the people whose parents and grandparents had worked for us for 50 years. He was so arrogant in his victory. He treated me with a kind of gentle, pitying condescension that was almost worse than his anger had been. He would pat my hand and tell me not to worry, that he had everything under control. He had no idea that I was just waiting, patiently, for the right moment to make my final move. The moment came at the annual shareholder meeting. It was a formality, usually. A small gathering of the board members and a few key employees who held small stakes in the company. David had called the meeting to officially announce his new role as the majority shareholder and to vote himself into the position of Chief Executive Officer, officially replacing my late husband. He thought it was his coronation. He stood at the podium, beaming. He spoke of a new era for Sterling Textiles. He spoke of maximizing shareholder value. He spoke of bold, decisive leadership. It was a speech full of empty, modern corporate jargon that said nothing and everything all at once. And then it came time for the vote. As the new majority shareholder, he said, his voice ringing with triumph, "I would like to call a vote for the new CEO of this company. I nominate myself, David Price." He smiled, waiting for the polite, perfunctory applause. But before anyone could clap, a voice, calm and clear, cut through the silence. "I believe there's a second nomination." Every head in the room turned. It was Mr. Harrison, my lawyer, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the room. He stood up. David stared at him, his smile faltering. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison," he said, a flicker of annoyance in his voice. "I believe I hold the majority voting shares. The vote is a formality." "Is that so?" Mr. Harrison said, walking slowly to the front of the room. He was holding a leather-bound portfolio. "It is true that last week, Mrs. Agnes Sterling signed over her block of 500,000 voting shares to you. However, I believe you may have overlooked a small secondary trust, the A.S. Legacy Trust. The A.S. Legacy Trust, established in 1985. I watched David's face. The color was beginning to drain from it. He had no idea what Mr. Harrison was talking about. "This trust," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice echoing in the silent room, "contains a block of 250,000 non-voting preferred shares, a gift from the late Mr. Arthur Sterling to his wife. However, the trust contains a rather interesting covenant, a covenant that states that in the event that Mrs. Sterling's primary family shares should ever leave her direct control, these preferred shares automatically convert. They become 750,000 fully empowered class of voting shares. Now, I'm Tanzania. I'm Tang. A collective gasp went through the room. David looked like he had been struck by lightning. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. He was doing the math in his head. 500,000 versus 750,000. He didn't have the majority. He had never had the majority. Mr. Harrison opened his portfolio. As the trustee of the A.S. Legacy Trust, and on behalf of its sole beneficiary, Mrs. Agnes Sterling, I would like to use these 750,000 votes to nominate a new CEO. I nominate Mrs. Agnes Sterling. The silence was absolute. David just stood there, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and dawning, horrified understanding. He looked at me, and in my eyes he saw no confusion, no frailty. He saw the woman who had just checkmated him in front of his entire company. He saw the queen he had never known was on the board. All those in favor? Mr. Harrison asked. I raised my hand. Slowly, one by one, the other old board members, friends of Arthur, men who had been cowed by David's bluster, but who remembered the heart of the company, raised their hands as well. It was done. I had taken back my company. The aftermath was swift. David was voted out of the company entirely. The contract with the cheap supplier was canceled. The plans for restructuring were scrapped. I rehired every single person he had planned to fire. We went back to doing business the way my Arthur had taught us, with honor and with a commitment to quality. My daughter, Eleanor, was heartbroken and humiliated. She could not comprehend the cold, calculating nature of the man she had married. She saw, finally, that his ambition was not for their family, but for himself. Their marriage, built on his ambition and her adoration, crumbled under the weight of his public disgrace. They are divorced now. He went back to New York, a defeated man. Eleanor and I are healing. She is the managing director of the Art Foundation I started with the company's profits, a foundation that supports local artists and weavers. She has found her own purpose, her own strength. She finally understands that her father and I didn't want her to be a businesswoman. We just wanted her to be a good person. I learned that the most dangerous enemies are the ones you welcome into your home, the ones who call you mother. I learned that greed is a kind of blindness. It makes a person see only the prize and not the board on which the game is being played. David was so focused on the shares he could see, he never bothered to look for the ones he couldn't. And I learned that you must never, ever underestimate a quiet old woman. We have lived long lives. We have buried husbands. We have raised children. We have kept secrets. And we know how to play the long game. They may think our minds are fading, but our memories are long. And we are always, always watching the board. So, if you are out there and you are being made to feel like a relic, like your time is over, please remember this old woman. You are the keeper of your own legacy. And you hold more power than they could ever possibly imagine. Thank you for letting me share this chapter of my life with you. It is a reminder that the most important assets are not the ones on a balance sheet. If you have enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and press the notification bell for more stories to come. And in the comments below, please feel free to share a story about a time when wisdom and patience won the day. Love you all. This is Grandma Agnes, and I'll see you in the next story.